It's 12 midnight and we just started into the witching hour. This is our review of The Fog on Top of the World Tonight.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, Daniel, can you please let the people know what we're going to be discussing or debating today?
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week we're talking about John Carpenter's The Fog from 1980, which I think is one of his less well-known movies, but it's one that I keep coming back to over the years, and I've enjoyed quite a lot. I'm generally fond of any movie that starts with the and ends with a noun. The Fog, The Thing, The Mist, that sort of thing. If that's what a movie is called, I'm probably having a good time. And this is one where it took me a while to get into it because it's one of the slower burns. It's notoriously a low budget, kind of a cozy horror movie, which just maybe to just summarize what it's about. It's set in this Californian coastal town that is about to celebrate its centennial. As the townspeople are preparing for that celebration, a mysterious fog begins to roll into the bay, and strange things start happening. So you just saw The Fog for the first time. What's your takeaway?
I could definitely appreciate it more and now for it being a low budget film because I didn't know because the what was happening in the film it didn't look like it wasn't given a low budget film. And the reason why I say that is because it came out in the 80s. So I thought, okay, I haven't really seen a lot of 80 movies, but
I mean, we saw like Exorcist, and that came out like over a decade before this. So movies didn't look like crap in 1980, right?
well, The Exorcist was mainly based in a house. So you
Yeah,
can't.
but there's like the effects and there's like we saw The Thing, which came out 70s or 60s. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
remember, right? So I'm just saying like this looks bad for 1980.
Well, that's the thing. I didn't know it looked bad for 1980 because in comparison to like obviously like the old films like which you said we've seen, the thing I could tell the budget for that one's crazy because the thing in terms of like the monster itself, what they were doing with it and the costume designs and just like the effects with the thing was it was crazy. The Exorcist I can't really tell too much because obviously it's mainly in the house. Even though I get it like whenever they were showing the supernatural sides, yeah, I understand. But like with this one, I personally didn't know it was a low budget from what I was seeing from what I was seeing. So I didn't take it in that sense. However, now realizing that it's a low budget film, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of like do appreciate it more. However, it doesn't kind of, I think my experience watching the film, I think the last 20 minutes were the more engaging part. Because obviously that's when pretty much the E gritty is happening. However, everything before that, the pacing was very, very slow. And of course, there were flaws in the story itself. However, it was a cool story. I liked how I liked the kind of like the antagonist idea of the fog carrying a supernatural force of revenge. Because like when you see the fog, you kind of it looks very mystical and it gives you that kind of like spook feel. So actually like kind of playing on that and having like a monster within the fog. And I could believe that. I could actually believe that. So I liked the idea. And I liked how they used the fog to kind of like pretty much attack the town. But in terms of the story itself, I liked the story. I just think it was just very slow, man. I think yeah, it's just the whole pacing of it was just very, very slow, and and at times it felt a bit bland. And I was watching, I was like, is this because it's in like, is this how 98 movies are? Is it just, you know, is that the tone? But then at the same time, I liked the thing, and the thing I think you said came out before, so it just felt like they were saying their lines. There wasn't really much personality, like in some of the characters, especially with the main two characters. Um, but it ended up progressing, especially when they started encountering the monsters. That's when you kind of see a bit more of their personality. But yeah, at times it was hard to kind of like the first act one and act two was kind of it was really hard to stay engaged. I'll be honest with you. Overall, I'd say I had an okay experience with this movie.
So this is one where I needed an attempt or two to really get into it. It's like on my very first viewing, I had a similar reaction to you. Like, what is this? Why is nothing happening? And I've talked about this before. My big bugbear in horror is this first half hour when nothing happens. And I think this is not like this. I think there actually are lots of things happening right from the beginning, right? We are starting to learn things about the history of the town. We're introducing the main characters who do things that are relevant. Like, I think the first supernatural thing happens within 5 minutes. where the ghosts kind of attack the church with the goal of releasing the diary so that the current priest can find out about what his grandfather did, who was the priest at the time, like the pivotal events happened, right? So I think it might take maybe another viewing to really get a feeling for what's important. Because once you do know what's important, which is the fog is coming, and there's like a ticking clock kind of thing where we are approaching the centennial and people are preparing for those celebrations. And we get a sense that the ghosts attack at the centennial, right? Because that's what motivates them. That's the grievance that they have as ghosts, right? My point is just we don't like while we spend a little time with like Stevie and her son and things like that, and what's her name, Elizabeth, and like her hitchhiking adventures and all of that. It very quickly progresses to stuff happening, right? Like there's that ship, what's it called? The Sea Dog? Yeah, the Wikipedia summary doesn't say the name, but like there's the ship that gets attacked by the ghosts, right? And somebody notices that they are missing, and so a search party goes out and they recover a body that should not be the way it is, right? Because it didn't in fact drown and stuff like that, right? So I actually think stuff happens very, very quickly and builds up to this like creeping approach of the ghosts, and you can like physically see the fog approaching the town. You kind of get a sense of how close they are.
I hear what you're saying, but it felt like I was watching a zombie from The Walking Dead walk to you from across the road. The pacing was just felt very slow to build up to that moment of something happening. Because like, don't get it twisted. Like I do, like when things did happen, it was a bit like exciting, but just to get to that point, it felt like a very long time. And the movie was 1 hour and 30 minutes, I believe, but it felt longer. So, and it shouldn't feel longer if it's 1 hour and 30 minutes. That's my issue with it. I do agree things were happening. Weird things were happening, and there were things which weren't really explained, which we'll probably get into later. But just that was just my issue. So I do agree with what you're saying. Things were happening, but just for me, it was just too slow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's fair. It certainly is deliberately slower paced, right? Because it is the sleepy town, and we are supposed to get a sense of creeping dread, right? And we know that the fog is coming. We know what's in the fog. We know what happens when they get there, right? So that's supposed to be the suspense, but that doesn't work for everybody, right? So you mentioned you had some issues with the plot or some open questions. Like, what was something that wasn't clear?
So, like for example, right? You know the six conspirators who killed Blake. They weren't shown. So even though they were speaking about it, like I get it as part of the history, but I think showing it would still be important. Especially like for example, especially with the scene with there was another scene with what's his name, Father Malone.
Yeah.
Yeah. When he found the book, how did he know that the ghost would come to was it Antonio Bay? Like how did he know that?
So he doesn't know initially. He finds out about how these sailors that belong to this leper colony were cheated out of their gold, right? And that this gold was used to found the town, right? That's the part that he finds out from the diary. And then these other two women who are organizing the centennial, they come to him and basically tell him what's going on, and then they put the two pieces together, right? Saying, okay, so like we're being attacked by these beings, and the diary tells us what they want and what their grievance is. That's kind of the idea.
Well, that does answer my question then. Okay.
I do actually have a story problem with this. Not so much a problem, but more like one way in which it could have been better, which is that we don't see like this. Like there's obviously this idea of like this historical injustice, right? Like that the town was founded on a lie, right? And it was founded by thieves and murderers, right? But those thieves and murderers are now being celebrated as heroes because they founded the town, and the town is doing well 100 years later. It seems like the movie doesn't do very much to kind of show the legacy of that and kind of reinforce that theme very much, right? Because we're not really seeing what the stakes of that were or what the ramifications of that were. You could imagine a situation where other towns in the area have failed, but this town survived, and people think, oh, our ancestors were just that amazing. No, they stole the gold, and with that they bought what they needed to survive, right? And other people were more scrupulous or didn't have the same opportunity by chance, and that's why their settlements failed, but ours succeeded, but not for the reasons we think. Like something like that, I think would make it a little bit stronger, where this idea maybe where people are really proud of the heritage, or something like that, right? Or where this idea of being self-made, or that town takes really, really big pride in coming from nothing, or something like that, right? Like, you can overdo this, but I think the script could have used like a sprinkling of this idea, because then when the ghosts show up and confront people, and people have to own up to their history, it has more impact. I think that is the part where that's a little bit lackluster, right? Because ultimately it's just ghosts are here to kill us, and the why does not really have very much, like, it's obviously why the ghosts are there, but it's not very personal, right?
And you're right, because and that's what I was asking, because it felt, but weren't the killings random though? Because two things. The first thing, I'll talk about the killings later, but you're right in terms of it kind of should have showed kind of like the cultural impact that stealing the gold would have had, because it felt like they just moved, it was not even felt like the film was revolved around the main characters a lot. So it was like, okay, show us kind of like the town, show us what the town's like, show us what the people are like. It could have even been a moment to kind of to see, because they could have still had, like, those the same qualities that the thieves had back in the day, or the killers had back in the day that killed the ship crew. You know what I'm saying? And that would have felt more impactful, and would have felt like the killings were more justified, because like when the killings were happening, it felt kind of random. Like they were going after a kid, they were going after women, like a woman, and they were even going after the creepy guy that kept on calling the radio hostess. And I was like, okay, but why? Like, for example, in was it Van Helsing? When he kind of like, that scene where he shadowed the whole city.
Which version of Van Helsing?
The recent one, not Van Helsing, sorry, Nosferatu.
Yep.
And where he kind of like his shadow kind of went all over the whole city. Like a scene like that shows like the whole city's under attack, and it was effective, right? Because obviously what he was looking for was in that city, and obviously he was already gonna kill everyone in that city. But that it wasn't like that in this scene. There was like individuals were getting picked off, and the individuals that were getting picked off, I didn't see the link between their story, as in the ghost, the monster story, and the characters that are getting killed off, as in like what did they do? I understand that they're residents of the town, but
why them? Why
exactly
them as
why
opposed to
that?
somebody else?
So maybe they could have had a scene where, like, they did have a scene where the fog was going to the town. I get that. However, it still felt like there were individual personal attacks, but there wasn't personal reasons given.
So I think the priest is the only one where it's personal,
Yeah.
right? Where he has the gold, which is a plot hole that I think it's a plot hole, which is that they used the gold to found the town, right? But then the gold is in the crucifix, so they didn't spend it. It's been sitting there in the church as a prestige object for 100 years, right? So did I miss something?
I don't, because I think I don't think those that killed the sailors wanted the gold. I think they just wanted to stop the sailors from going into their town, or like or something. But I don't think the gold was
they had leprosy, and they had wanted, basically they would have contracted leprosy if the sailors had landed, so they killed them all.
Okay, yeah.
But I thought they also took all their gold. Or did I get that wrong?
I think they did take their gold, but I think they took everything on the ship. So I don't think. Well, that's a bit. But then that's strange then, because if they didn't take the gold, but to be fair, with the ending, the priest still died. So that does kind of tell us that the gold wasn't the reason for the revenge.
Yeah. So I guess I misunderstood that, because I always thought they took the gold and used that gold to found the town. But I guess that was kind of a side effect. They also took the gold, but it was mostly about protecting the town by killing these 6 sailors, and that is also why returning the gold does not make the ghosts go away.
Exactly, but they're priests, and obviously the other characters thought, okay, maybe obviously the reason is the gold. Which would that's actually interesting. That makes it a bit more interesting. So obviously their presumptions on why they think what's happening isn't necessarily true. Because obviously they thought it was obviously money motivated, but obviously it's not. It's deeper than that. Which is pretty cool. You are right. Maybe obviously the gold is one of the main reasons, but
I always thought it was, but now I'm not so sure. Like, the bottom line is the town would have failed had they not killed the sailors, right? And part of it is that they were sick and would have infected everybody. Part of it is that they had gold, right? But I'm not so sure which of the two was more important. It seems to be it's more about the leprosy, but okay.
But what about this movie? Okay, so because out of all the movies you recommended, right, I think this one, in terms of story, might be the weakest one. Now, in terms of the antagonist threat, I did mention that is actually one of like my one of the favorite ones. However, in terms of the way that the story was presented, I do feel like it was one of the weakest ones. So, what about this do you like? I'm confused. Is it one of your favorites?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a favorite. Like there's a lot of movies above The Fog for me,
Mm.
but it's one I like. It's one I have on the shelf, one I rewatch every once in a while. I just don't think there are very many good ghost movies like this. A lot of ghost movies, it kind of depends on what era they're from, but there's a lot of wandering around in dark places, and then like some scary stuff happens, and then there's some kind of set piece at the end, and then movie's over, and then maybe somebody survived. Like it's okay. Like that's not all ghost movies, right? Like The Others is an example of a movie that's different. If you haven't seen it, I'm not gonna spoil it because there the entire point is kind of it builds up to something. But like that's the basic, like the standard template of ghost movies is kind of like the like haunted house movie stuff like this. And here it's an entire town. I like the coastal town setting. Like I just like the sea, right? That's part of it. So I just like the setting. The characters are likable, I think, and also this is like a. I actually think the performances are quite good because they have to carry the movie, right? Because it's certainly not the special effects. Special effects are just a fog machine and a torch, and that's the special effects budget, right? Everything else is carried by the performance, and we have to care about these characters, and a lot of it is just Stevie talking into a microphone, right? Like she has to carry that, like a lot of the atmosphere just with her voice. And it's little things like this, right? So there isn't a lot of fat to this, even though it's a bit of a slow burn. You are constantly moving towards the big showdown, like you're taking a leisurely stroll, but you're moving. You're not walking in circles. You're not stopping. You're always very slowly moving forwards. And as you do, you get to know these characters and you get to know this place. And then the ghost pirates show up. So that's kind of what I like about it. And I actually think that like this is a case of where the number one important thing about a movie is a script and good actors to sell the script, right? Because this movie like had to rely on the actors carrying the plot and the atmosphere and the emotion. There was no fixing in post in this, right? We've got a fog machine and 10 minutes go, right? We know we have to sell the ghost pirates, and I think the ghost pirate like there's like two shots like with the glowing red eyes where the ghost pirates are pretty cool, but otherwise they're just dudes in shadow. It's kind of all there is to them, and we almost only get like very close ups to them. And there's like one scene I think where we see maggots crawling on like decaying flesh and stuff like that. So there's not a lot for like not a lot in terms of spectacle, right? So it's all mood, it's all atmosphere, and I think that is what really makes this movie. And there's not that much else that really does that in quite the same way, I think. I'm really tired of horror movies where it's just scared people running down a hallway or looking scared, like, what was that? Right? Like, I don't care. It's not scary and it's not suspenseful. And this movie doesn't really do that, right? Like, one of the things I really like about this is how there's no idiots in this. Like these are just town. Everybody's doing their job, right? Like the sheriff is doing his job, the weather people are doing their job, the Coast Guard people are doing their job. The mayor is not evil, the priest is not evil. Like everybody is kind of just doing what they're supposed to, more or less, and they kind of have to figure out the situation as it happens. And they make mistakes, right? And they don't know everything, and but there's like no there's no tedious scene, for instance, where Stevie tries to warn the chief of police, the sheriff, and he just blows her off as being like as making it up or being drunk or whatever, right? Like we've seen this 100 times in movies, right? And here it's just he doesn't immediately go to yes, ghost pirates, but he takes her seriously. And when she says her child is in danger, people take her seriously. And it's kind of the community kind of works together, and which is again a nice contrast with this whole idea. This community was founded on a lie, but it's become a real community, right? That kind of thing, right? So I think there's stuff here where it's not quite it's not just a ghost movie, right? It's not just like a cheap 80s horror movie that's disposable. I think this is actually good.
I was gonna say I do agree with the mood and atmosphere. I think they've done out of every film, it kind of does jump into the scary gore rather than building that dark tone. Do you know what I'm saying? I think, like I said, with other movies, it's just straight away, bang, you're already in that dark tone. You're already like just in that dark atmosphere. What with this movie, it gradually builds because it starts from obviously, well, not starts from, it's like from the beach, obviously, where the sun finds the wood plank or something like that. And then it slowly progresses to darkness, even though like there are scenes in between where yeah, it's already nighttime. However, you do feel it gradually building to darkness. So I
I
will
think
agree that
I think it takes place over 2 days. I think there's
yeah,
2 nights, and on the second day things get real. Like I think in the first evening, the first hauntings start to happen,
mm,
and then on the second day, the pirates actually arrive.
yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I do agree. Like as I'm saying, like the gradual build of darkness in this film in comparison to any other like ghost movies, it's done very good because like I said, the other movies it just jump straight into it, but this
And
one,
it also stays at zero for a long time, and
yeah,
then suddenly goes to no ghosts.
yeah,
And here it's like very slowly. Like we get some initial attacks, and we get some hauntings, and we get some mysteries,
mm,
and then clues start coming together, and people start acting on it. But there's no real evidence yet. But people are kind of aware that something is going on, and
yeah.
so when it does happen, they kind of have an idea of what they need to do, right?
Mm.
That sort of thing. Yeah, so I think on that front, it's better than most.
Okay, I'm not trying to be an asshole, right? But even though it does those things kind of well, can some films just be boring?
Sure. Yeah, lots of movies are boring. There's like technical aspects to whether or not a movie is good. Right,
Mm,
you can point to okay, this pacing is just off, or this characterization, or there's plot holes, or like there are technical aspects where you can say okay, this is just bad or good, right? But ultimately, if you don't like it, you don't like it.
I'm gonna try and watch this again just to see if I just think this film's boring because like obviously what you've mentioned is that okay, yeah, I can see that and I see that now and I do agree with what you said, especially like the gradual build in atmosphere. So I do agree with that. So now I just want to watch it again. And just kind of like see if any of that changes or if it's a thing where I just find it boring. Because yeah, I don't know. It's a
Look,
stick. This one's a
I
sticky one.
think Seven Samurai is an hour too long, right? I'm not a snob when it comes to movies. Like Seven
Mm.
Samurai, one of the most celebrated classical movies ever, doesn't need to be 3 hours.
I don't think I've
Can
even seen that.
can be a lean 100 minutes, right?
Okay, cool.
That's like all the cinephiles are going to unsubscribe now, if there's any watching, right? Like, but like I'm not a snob when it comes to this, right? If you don't like something, you don't like something. And
Mm,
personally, I like punchy, tight stories that progress quickly, right?
yeah.
And so for that reason, it took me a minute to get into this too, right? Like the third watch is the first one I enjoyed. I think
I
the
see.
first one I kind of was well. This is John Carpenter, and I like a whole bunch of his other movies, so I should watch this. And like the premise sounds interesting, and it's got a noun in the title, so it's probably good. And then I said the first time I watched it, I said, "Well, what is this like? Like, why is there 5 minutes of ghosts and the rest is people talking?" If you're used to like more modern horror movies, like they tend to be more intense more quickly. And here it's more of a build up, and I think it's a little bit like The Exorcist in that it's not a typical. It's not like most ghost movies. I think it's got ghosts in it and it's got pieces in common, but it is its own thing. And so, if you have expectations that come from other ghost movies, I think this can be underwhelming because there's not a lot in this, right?
I think the investigation to what's happening adds that different feel to it. Because usually when people are investigating ghosts, there's usually like like equipment or a team. Do you know what I'm saying? There's usually that
Mm-hmm.
sort of like like a paranormal team kind of like investigating a situation, or like the dumb school kids in a type of haunted house, haunted mansion, or family in the house, and they're trying to fight off the ghost. But this one is like okay, they're investigating history and they're investigating obviously their past as well as in terms of like regarding the guy's grandfather. So
But there's actually a lot of ghost stories that are about investigating what happened. So one thing that's happened like in the last, I want to say 20 years,
hmm,
is that ghosts are no longer monsters, right? Like if you go back to older ghost stories, like the ghosts are evil and you have to defeat them, and they're evil and they're coming after you and stuff like that. And over time, they have become victims, right? Where some injustice happened in the past, and you have to help them move on. That's almost every ghost movie made in the last 10 to 20 years. I'm not exactly sure when that cut kind of happened, but the further back in time you go, the more likely it is that the ghosts are monsters. And the more recent, the more likely it is that the ghosts are victims that have to be helped. And this did this in 1980. right? They're not exactly victims, and we're not really helping them move on, but they have an understandable grievance, and the priest does not fight them. That he tries to apologize. He tries to atone for the injustice that made them come back. Right? And then they do in fact kill people, and people do in fact try to survive, obviously. Like they don't just lie down and and sacrifice themselves. But like this idea that the ghosts are the victims, or the ghosts exist because of an injustice in the past. I mean, this movie didn't invent this, but I think it's ahead of the curve, right? Because I think the further back in time you go, the less likely this was. Like this idea of unfinished business and stuff like that does come back, but I think if the further back you go, the more likely it is that ghosts are antagonists as opposed to somebody that needs help. And I think that's kind of interesting that this movie is kind of ahead of the curve in that way, because it's that's basically what's happening here, right? It's kind of in between, right? It's not quite the same as a modern ghost story where the ghost is just a passive victim, but I think it's there.
Obviously, there are a lot of the ghost stories that I've seen. Yeah, okay. Yes, some are investigating. However, it's more like from a sense of either we're in need of investigating because we're about to die, or we're investigating for just for business purposes, as in like the whole paranormal team. Whereas this one was like, okay, they don't necessarily know what's going on, and it's a community, and that community has history, and there's obviously individuals, which I wanted them to kind of link, which was a disappointing thing, because I don't think none of them kind of like linked to the story itself in terms of like the ghosts.
I think only the priest does, right? Only the priest does.
Yeah.
Or the rest are just, they happen to live in that town.
Yeah, which is a bit might not be disappointing because that, and then it might.
But that's also that fits the theme, right? Because we all live in places that have histories, right? And then history, like no place in the world has like a 100% like pristine history, right? It's always been like people have always done desperate things, or there's probably no places in the world where nothing bad has ever happened, right? And if you try hard enough, you will trace back through time and find something that you don't approve of, but ultimately you benefit from that, right? So I don't think it needs to be personal in this. It just needs to be, they need to be part of the community, and that community benefits or exists because of what happened 100 years ago. If everybody had a personal connection, if like they were all descended from the 6 people who committed those murders 100 years ago, that would be a bit hackneyed, I think.
But not a personal connection in that sense, but it could be like a personal connection where like each individual relates to the 6 people that killed.
That's what I mean. If they were all descended from that group, that would be really hacky.
But well, not actual descendants, but like they showed qualities. Like for example, right, the qualities that got those people killed. That's why I said like showing the people that actually killed those sailors would have kind of been like cool, because it's like each of them could have different personalities, and the people that were dying had similar personalities in a sense. Where the same way there was a scene, like for example, the creep, right? I understand why he would get knocked off. Maybe someone that killed, obviously, one of the sailors had that similar personality or that similar character trait. Do you know what I'm saying? Just like similarities, I think would have made the killings justified, rather than just okay, you're from the city, so you're gonna die. That's kind of like a serial killer just killing people because for like a stupid reason, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because living in a community, I get I understand your point of what you're saying. Obviously, you're from a community that has dark history. I get that, but just randoms dying because they're from that community is like, okay.
But like
cool. I understand it, but
from the point of view of the ghosts, they're just attacking the community, right? And they want justice for what was done to them. And their grievance is not with anybody alive today, it's with the community. And that is why they attack during the centennial and stuff like that, right? They're not really targeting any one specific person, really. They are heading towards the church, but that's about it, right? They're not specifically going after specific people for the most part. I think we've kind of touched on the special effects a little bit. And I think it's undeniable that they're just cheap, right?
Well, they were pretty cool though.
Yeah, but it's like just some fog and with some backlights, and even in 1980. So I have it on DVD, and I don't think it exists on Blu-ray, at least not in the UK. And that might be for the better, because the effects probably don't hold up in higher resolution. Because it's probably really cheap, and they probably took a lot of shortcuts, and they just had to work with a really minimum budget, right? Like, budget for this was $1 million in 1980, and that was low by 1980 standards. And they make the most out of their locations. And I think that's why we get a lot of like shots of the town, like just building the atmosphere. A lot of the money then goes into the couple of shots where we actually see the sailors. And I think that's actually like this is one of those examples where constraints breed creativity, where like this actually ties into like one of my big problems with like big CGI spectacles today, where the philosophy is you can fix anything in post, which is true, but then you don't have to think about what you are depicting, right? You don't have to be careful about your shots. You kind of just do whatever and then piece it together afterwards. And Carpenter, like when making this movie, had to be very careful about where to put his money, right, for maximum effect. You know, that is why we see so little of the ghosts, and this is why we see them almost always in close-up. And there's maybe two real beauty shots, right, where we actually see them not in shadow, right, and we get the red lights, like the glowing red eyes and stuff like that. Actually, I think the image of the ghost standing in the fog with the red eyes is cool. I think that looks great, but like I think the budget issues meant that they had to be very careful. They had to be very deliberate. Okay, where do we put these shots, and how many can we afford, and how can we get the most out of the few that we afford? And I think that just leads to better filmmaking, not necessarily because it looks better in the end, because this doesn't look good. But it means you have, like, everything becomes deliberate. And nothing is just hand-waved, nothing is just, oh, we'll fix it later. It's all very careful, deliberate, thoughtful. Everything is thought about. They had to think about what's important, what isn't, what can we cut, and what do we have to spend money and time on. So I think that's kind of an example of this, where I think for its budget and for its constraints, it gets maximum effect out of what little it had. For that reason, I don't care how good it looks or how bad it looks. It just, like, I can see the effort, I can see the intention, and the actors are selling me on the reality of this. And then I go along with the hokey fog effects. It just looks bad, like the glowing fog rolling into the bay does not look good. Actually, there was a remake in the 2000s, but it's basically the same story. There's some differences, like some emphasis, like it's basically the same story, but the emphasis is different. And it had the money to do more elaborate set pieces. And it's not better. Like that scene where Stevie talks to the weather guy, right, over the phone, where the fog has reached his weather station, and there's the ghost on knocking on the door, and he says, "I'm going to check this out quickly," and she's on the phone, and she just hears him die. She basically has to sell that just through her performance, right? In the remake, it's like action scene, CGI, guy flying across the room, the entire room is trashed. It's not better. That movie basically just said, okay, we have the money now, we can just do what we want. And that meant that they didn't think as carefully about what was important. And as a result, it's actually worse than the 80s version. In terms of atmosphere, in terms of character, it looks nicer for the most part. Like, there's some shots in that look a lot nicer, right? It's also 20 years later. But overall, it's a worse movie. And part of that was that not, for one, it wasn't directed by John Carpenter, and number two, it wasn't as desperate, it wasn't as hungry. Like, this is a very hungry movie, right? It wants, like, it can't have everything it wants. It has to pick and choose, and so it has to pick what's important.
I'm actually gonna. It's not that I'm gonna disagree with you, but I feel kind of different in terms of the fog effects and the monsters. I think for me,
I think it looks like a student film.
And
Like
it
the fog itself.
it kind of gave me theater vibes, and that kind of brought me
Yeah.
back into that because we would use fog machine, but we would use one of those as well back in the day for like our theater shows to kind of give that feel as well. So cool, yeah. Okay, it brought me like, okay, I was reminiscent of that, but at the same time, it kind of, there was like a certain thickness about the fog which kind of differentiates real fog from supernatural fog. And then when you
Mhm.
enter, so for me, I was like, okay, I could see it was cheap. However, like you said, it does kind of like force creativity and it forces you to kind of think out the box. So for that, it could be interpreted as, well, okay, this is not the regular type of fog that you usually see. This one is, you can see the thickness, you can feel the evilness behind the thickness. That's how I,
Yep.
even though you could say I'm forcing it a bit, but that's how I kind of saw it, and that's how like I said, it just felt different, and I liked it. I liked it. Even though you could tell it was cheap, but um, it was, you know, Vikings, right?
Like the
No,
people or like a
no, no,
movie
no.
or
Sorry, the show
right?
Vikings,
Okay.
the show Vikings. Now, in the show Vikings, their costume design is so like in not the Netflix one, but in the original one, the one I don't know what channel it came out on
I think
before, but History
I
Channel, I
think it
think.
started out on the History Channel.
Yeah, History Channel. Yeah, right. Their costume design, I wouldn't say it's cheap, but it's suitable to its time, as in like it's very worn out, broken down, etc., etc. Whereas in a Netflix show, you can tell there's a big budget behind their costume
Hmm.
design because it looks so new. But the new looks so freaking terrible because it doesn't look. I think even you were the one that made this point. It doesn't look realistic. Like it to obviously its time looks very like it seems like it was untouched. I don't know if it was for Vikings, but you made a
As far
point
as I
about.
know, that show has nothing to do with history. Like it's just
Okay,
all wrong.
no, but not okay. But I mean, in terms of like its time, like the question, I don't know if it was for Vikings that you made a point, but you made a point for a different show or a movie where you said the costume it seems so brand new, it looks tacky. But
We
the
said that
point of
about like pretty much all Netflix shows have this problem. I think we
yeah,
said this about Avatar, where it looked like also like so it's a bunch of stuff.
mm,
Avatar did this like a year ago about we talked about the Netflix show I think it was that seemingly went nowhere at all. It was a huge thing at the time. And in our review of that a year ago, we talked about how it looks like a stage play because it looks like every single piece of clothing was worn for the first time.
yeah.
And
So,
new Star Wars has the same problem. It all looks brand new.
but this one, I'm glad it didn't look brand new. It had that tacky kind of cheap, not tacky. Sorry, it had that kind of like old, dirty, homeless, cheapness type of look, which is
Mhm.
fitting for the ghost. It's fitting for the antagonist. So I kind of liked it. I liked it. I liked when you saw the smoke, even though it did feel like felt like watching a theater show whenever they were introduced. However, you could still feel the difference in what an actual fog looks like. You know what I'm saying? So it just felt different. It felt different.
Yeah,
I
I
was like,
think
okay, here's a Dark
I think you
City.
just have to be on board with the fact that yes, this is cheap, but I'm
Mm,
here for the atmosphere, and
mm,
that part works. I think that's also like an indication that not all parts of a movie are equally important, and the
mm,
parts that are important are different for every movie. So
mm,
here, the fog looking good is not that important. I mean, it would be nice if it was, right? Like, obviously, that would be better.
mm,
But the more important part here is that the people, like we care about the people, and they sell us on their emotions, right? That when Stevie is afraid for her son, she sells that, right? And this is kind of reminiscent of a lot of my critiques of a bunch of movies in recent months, where I said being better does not automatically cost more, right? Just having actors say better lines does not automatically cost more money. Like having more locations and having special effects and having more people, like more characters and stuff like that, that costs more money. But just having an actor you already have say different lines does not cost more money. And like this movie realized this, right? This movie basically said, yeah, we have like three major characters or four maybe, and we're gonna get as much as we can out of them because that's all we got. And I think it gets credit for that. Like it's not my favorite movie, like I said, right? It's not like my top 10 or anything. Like, it's just a movie I like. And I think this movie really shows you like what you can do with no budget, right? And often people will excuse bad movies as yeah, but look, will excuse it with just look at the budget, like what we're supposed to do. Well, watch this movie and tell me what you can do with no budget. You can get good performances out of actors without a massive special effects budget or something like that. All right, any last words on the fog?
Last words, pretty much last thoughts. Hey man, I'm definitely gonna watch it again. I think that's the main thing. I now that I'm gonna watch it with more information as into what was happening as well, not even into what was happening, but as in like the differences of obviously this type of a ghost with the fog, a ghost story in the fog in comparison to obviously the other type of ghost stories, and obviously what this does well in comparison to obviously the others. I will look at it from a different outlook, which and also kind of like now knowing that this is the budget is definitely low for its time as well. I'm definitely gonna it'll keep me more engaged because that was the issue that I had with the first one. It was very hard to stay engaged because of the slow pacing. But obviously, you've outlined kind of that builds to like it builds to the story because obviously it's slow. It doesn't just go straight into kind of like a dark atmosphere type of tone, but it builds to it, gradually builds to it. So I'm gonna definitely watch it. I think the main thing that I got from this is I need to watch it. I'm gonna watch it again. I'm gonna see if my opinions change and if it's a thing where okay, I just missed out on a lot of things, or if I just find it to be a boring film. So yeah, I'm gonna watch it
And
again.
And like the fact that this is a John Carpenter movie does not mean it's a good movie. Like John Carpenter specifically, he's made some of my favorite movies, like The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, a couple of others. I've got this filmography here. Escape from New York is not bad. Halloween obviously is a classic. There's a bunch of them. In the Mouth of Madness is pretty good. And then he also made Ghosts of Mars, right? So
Yeah, I guess
it's like
that.
it's a coin flip, right? And I also think Prince of Darkness is a bunch of pretentious crap, which is basically about the devil is kept in a church and some physicists are trying to resurrect him. Not good. Like not my favorite movie. So the fact that John Carpenter made it does not make it a good movie. Being a good movie makes it a good movie, right? And every movie has to earn its own like appreciation. And I think if somebody's just bored by The Fork, then that's fine. I just do think there's a couple of interesting things here, especially if you care. Like I'm not that much of a filmmaking nerd, but just thinking about like this whole idea of this had to be very deliberate and very careful, and that made it a better movie because people thought about what to put on screen. That's really one of the big ingredients to making a good movie, and this movie is kind of the proof of that.
Well, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today.
If you like this video, tell a friend. If you hated this, tell an enemy.
We will catch you next week. Thank you very much. Au revoir.
Bye bye.